So yeah, while the R&D car is pretty well done, the last thing left on the list was the digital gauge cluster, which I was going to try and tackle today, but I don't know where I put it. Oh, there it is. So yeah, gonna pull out the gauge cluster that I worked on several episodes ago, pretty well throw it away, and try and get a digital one to work. So I guess I should start breaking it out of the box. Okay, so one thing that I like about it is that I get to get rid of the speedometer cable. Even though the cable's new, for some reason I just don't like them. I guess it's because I attributed a whole bunch of nasty grinding sound, which I'm guessing is probably the gauge cluster, to being the cable, so I kind of have a negative perception of it already. But anyway, this will thread in, plug into this. I'll wire this into the harness, I'm sure. My dad also ordered this pin. He says this was needed for it, so that'll be somewhere along the way. Instructions. Sensors, some screws to mount it. This is a kit from Intellitronix as well. Pretty sure. Doesn't say. Yes, Intellitronix. This is a kit from Intellitronix. It's supposed to have a lifetime warranty to it. Seems to have pretty good reviews. Now, obviously, it's not Dakota Digital, but like I said, this is an R&D car, so, you know, if it doesn't work worth a darn, then we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But it'll definitely work better than the cluster that's in the car, because I rebuilt it, and it partially works. So yeah, let me go ahead and see about starting to get this prepped. Okay, so pulled the film off one side because it would not do us any good at all to have film on the cover itself. So you see there's holes here, there, two up here. These are going to be the mounting holes, I presume. It's nice to see it's made in the USA. Obviously, I guess I'm ready to take the film off and bolt it down, but just a heads up, when you're wiring this, give yourself a little extra room in here, because when I'm pulling the gauge cluster out, sometimes I would kind of reach my limit on how far those wires would go. It tends to be a pain sometimes, so I'm going to give myself a little extra here. So. Okay, so after I tighten these, I'll be trying to mount it back into this. Okay, so next on the list here is to get it installed. I did not find a 6th bolt for that. I'll have to contact them and ask about that, but if we're being quite honest, it's not the end of the world. I'm gonna get it dropped into the cluster as per the instructions. Dowel pin aligned. Though it is not aligning down here. So there's the finished product once it's bolted down. Luckily with the smoked lens you don't see all those radical numbers, and it's more what it would look like as far as not being standoutish. Okay, so obviously with the new harness that's in, I'm not sure if you're able to see it quite well or not. It has some of these that are lights that are just illumination. I'd rather not hack those out, so what I think I'll do is take the bulb out, push the hot part of the wire up through and tape it really good, and then tape it all with electrical tape afterwards. Just kind of wad it up and keep it covered to where it can't, ground out against anything. And then tuck in what I don't use, cut this far enough back on those that I do use, and put a butt splice, because obviously that much slack would look better than, or this much would look better than that. So I should be able to bring my cluster on out and set it up top if need be. I'm going to get started on this. After that, I'll leave it out and I'll test it and crank it and all that good stuff. But for now, it's just going to be a lot of tedious wire stripping and crimping and clamping and all that good stuff. So far, the wiring's been pretty straightforward. These are the 3 wires, the 12 volt hot to keyed hot rather, the ground, and then the white wire which runs to the gauge cluster. All come down to some quick connects, and once I get some wire loom and run it down the back side of the firewall, I will hook up this to that, and that's the speedometer sensor. So far, all that I've taken out have been these 4 wires. Everything else has been attempted to be tied back so that if you needed to reuse it, you could. Such as taping this off, taping these off, taping this off. That way I didn't butcher too much of the original harness. So far the wiring's been pretty straightforward. I did have to call Intellitronix. Apparently they're a rather small company, so it was a little difficult getting a hold of somebody for tech support, but we finally did, kind of understanding once they told us they were a small company. And an issue I had was that the instructions say that it's supposed to be like a 1-wire hookup for the fuel level. Well, it had 2 wires. This was hot and this was ground. After just some clarification, it's supposed to be the ground that hooks up. So I put a quick connect spade on it. I've ran a hot from the fuse block for the gauges. I've ran a ground from the fuse block for the gauges. And at this point, all that's left is running 4 more wires. One splices into the parking light on the headlight switch, and that's to dim the gauges 50% whenever the lights are on. One runs to the green of the standalone coil there for the tachometer to work. One runs into the oil pressure sending unit, which we left the manual gauge on as well, just as a comparison. And one to the water temp sending unit, which we have the manual Stewart Warner gauge in there as well, like I said, for comparison. I say that because I've had gauges fail on me before. I'm a little skittish, especially considering this motor is pretty worn out. I'd rather not pop it any sooner than what it has to go. But hopefully I can hammer out these last few wires being ran and pulled through, and then we'll give it a go and see how it works. Okay, after some trial and error, I think I have finally gotten everything hashed out here. I went ahead and left the mechanical gauges down here to compare the oil pressure and the temp to. They're really close. Fuel seems to be working, I guess. We don't have a whole lot of fuel in the tank. The voltage matches the battery charger whenever we have it on, and the RPMs and everything match. I haven't moved the car to check the mile per hour yet, but it was literally just plugging and playing per instructions on the wiring. The wiring behind this now looks awful because I did not use that quick connect plug. So we purchased a plug today, the other part of that, and I'll go ahead and do it right, but at least the gauges do work. Now, some things I want to point out on this is if this does not have a good 12 volts, it will give you a lot of trouble with the view on it. I was struggling with that for a little while, even though I had it pinned to the fuse block down here. For some reason, the pin I had it ran to was only getting like 4.6 volts. So everything was barely working. Yeah, it wasn't right. So anyway, got that. A few things to clarify on the instructions because they're a little vague, and you do have some difficulty getting a hold of the guys because it's such a It's basically like a one-man show from what I understand with the tech support. The dimmer wire goes to the purple wire on the headlight switch, so that whenever you pull the headlight switch out, you know, parking lights come on, it dims this so it's not as offensive at night. It has a wire for the emergency. It just says brake indicator. We called and talked to them. It's supposed to be for the emergency brake. Disregard that, because obviously these things don't have switches for the emergency brake. And for the fuel, as I said before, it's got two wires. One's pink, one's brown. The pink is hot. Just tape it off or cut it, you know, and wrap it up in the harness. Use the brown wire for the gauges here. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. It's fairly self-explanatory. We're going to take it for a quick drive and see how the mile per hour gauge works. From my understanding, it's supposed to calibrate some. I don't know, like self-calibrate. But it really changed the look inside the car. The last thing to point out, it has a little switch that I mounted down here. You can see I used a pre-existing hole for that. I didn't want to make any bigger holes up here or anything. That's to cycle the miles per hour, stuff like that. So yeah, there's that. It's done. Everything in here works now. Just have to get a radio and get these kicker panels painted, get them all wired up so we have a radio, and fix a few little leaks from areas through here where this gasket's bad. But now the next order of business, don't mind the mess in here, is this. This will be probably my next topic and video. This is a Ford 8.8 that we picked up from a U-Auto Pullet. It was 89 bucks. You know, they come with like 31 spline axles, disc brakes, pretty hefty housing, and we've done some research. You're supposed to be able to cut them certain ways, switch the tubes around, and it recorrects the pinion angle to what's needed for these cars a little more functionally anyway. And that'll give us a better gear ratio, a stronger rear end, and get us one step closer to have this thing cruising. So now it's a matter of trying to get the headlights lined out, because I stole some parts for the Nomad so my wife can use it for Christmas pictures. But thanks for watching. Till next time.